Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Ben Stein's dad was Herbert Stein, head of economic advisors for Richard Nixon.
Okay.
And he came up with this great saying called Stein's Law. And Stein's Law is very simple. It is that trends that can't continue won't. It is not sustainable that we stay at $10,000.
Wait until there's a crisis.
Again, we're a crisis-led state because everything's tactical. There is no strategy. We keep coming back to that.
This is so depressing.
But it's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Florida will stay here until it can't. It has to move.
Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. I am your host, Owen LaFave, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Today's guest has been described as one of Florida's most independent and forward-thinking public leaders. Senator Jeff Brandes served in the Florida legislature from 2010 to 2022, representing Pinellas County, where he built a reputation for independent, innovative solutions on issues like property insurance, criminal justice, transportation, amongst many others. U.S. Army veteran who served with the 101st Airborne in Iraq, Jeff now leads the Florida Policy Project, a nonpartisan think tank focusing on housing, insurance, infrastructure, and infrastructure reform. Also the chairman of the Patriot Select Property Insurance Company and a champion for emerging technologies like self-driving vehicles, which I can't wait to get into. But Senator Brandes, welcome to Money Market.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. So let me start by saying I wouldn't imagine you'd remember me because of the amount of people that come through your offices, but had an opportunity through the chamber, through NAOP, the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties, to engage with you on a number of issues. And what I always appreciated about you is you were that independent thinker. You're open-minded. You took the feedback, and when you didn't agree with it, I mean, we had a good, thoughtful conversation. It wasn't just you're taking notes and you're a yes man and shoo you out the door. I mean, I knew where you stood.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sometimes we agreed and sometimes we didn't. And
that's how it should work.
But we smiled and shook hands and
right.
walked away. And
great.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. What inspired you to get into politics?
So I spent, as you discussed, I spent 11 years in the military. I got out. I came back to work for my family business. But when I was in the military, I read this book called Capitalism and Freedom by Milton Friedman.
Okay. Yeah,
and I realized I'm a libertarian, right? And I really felt those libertarian roots. I think a lot of the problems that we're still dealing with today, he was discussing in that book in 1960s.
Yes.
And I think every now and then Republican legislators trip over capitalism and freedom, and then they think they've discovered something new, right? So Florida tends to lead, for example, in school choice. Well, there's a major chapter of that book talking about school choice and why that works. But every now and then, I think for me, it's important to go back, reread, and realize and kind of recenter myself on kind of what are the founding principles of free markets? What are the founding principles of kind of smaller government? And how do we as Floridians interpret that? And so kind of through that process, that is what inspired me to get involved in politics. I really didn't know where to start. So I met with my local mayor, Rick Baker, and he was like, don't run for city council, think about running for state office. And that's how I got to get engaged.
That's really interesting. I feel like that's counterintuitive to or maybe not just counter to what the typical advice is, right? You start at the local level and you kind of progress and work your way up. But his advice was,
I think politics is more about grabbing the rings when they come along, right? Than it is starting at the lowest rung and kind of grabbing and moving up, right? And so
you thought there was an
opportunity that comes in available. I mean, you see people all the time that were kind of never involved in politics. Now they're running for Congress, and you're like, where did these people come from, right? But that happens every now and then. It's not probably the traditional path, but it definitely occurs.
Okay. Reflecting on your time in the Senate, I mean, what accomplishments are you most proud of?
Well, I think you have to realize, my big takeaway after 12 years in public office is that everything in Tallahassee is tactical. There really is no strategy. And this is a fundamental structural problem with the state of Florida. Number one being that we change out our leadership every 24 months in the legislature. Like no other organization, no bank, no other major organization that's long-term successful changes out its leadership every 24 months. And that creates a very tactical way that the state thinks about problems. I played the game of Tallahassee kind of a different way because I was able to do this job full time, whereas most of my colleagues were doing it part time. So that was really my full-time gig for 12 years. And when that happens, you can participate at a totally different level and engagement. And so I think we were incredibly successful in the areas of flood insurance, led a lot of the property insurance reform charges, a lot of the work on self-driving cars, and a lot of the work on fatherhood and trying to get people to be re-engaged.
So, I mean, how do you think we change that then? I mean, is it simple as term limits?
So actually I wrote an op-ed on this, basically saying term limits in Florida are too short. Like everybody talks about 8-year term limits, that's optimal. Well, the 8-year term limits creates a 2-year leadership cycle. And if we just move to 12 and we move to 4-year leadership cycles, I think it would make a huge improvement, because now not only could you do the groundbreaking, you could do the ribbon cutting. Today, you do the groundbreaking and somebody else does the ribbon cutting, and they may not care about your project, and it may actually fall apart by the time that it may never be a ribbon cutting. And so we see this in Florida, and Florida's a pretty unique state. Like, we're the only real state that does it in this fashion. And so it creates some structural problems for the state.
It wasn't always that way, right?
Not historically, no. There was times we operated before term limits. Prior to like the early 2000s, Florida didn't have term limits. I think we have kind of been in this 2-year leadership cycle for a long, long time. That to me is the structural problem Florida faces.
I would imagine the legislature would be behind extending term limits. I mean, do you feel there's not the public will? And that's
it would take a constitutional amendment. It would be a challenge. I think there is a mechanism to do that. We probably should put term limits on school board members and county commissioners. And I think if they moved all term limits to 12 years, not the governors and cabinet, but all the kind of legislative branch, I think that would be effective. And I think that may be a chance to pass there.
Well, to your point, being tactical, I mean, by the time you're elected, I mean, you're working on your next election cycle. I mean, it's not even really a function. You're just figuring out the job.
Yeah, it's more so than membership. It's what it does to the leadership. I mean, imagine like you're going to be in, you've been involved, I'm sure, like a chamber of commerce where you're president for a year, and you're like, what?
That's my year right now.
Right. What change can I really affect in 1 year that's going to stick? It's really hard.
It's hard.
Versus if you had 4 years, then now I can follow through. I can make sure I've got the right people in place, everything else. This is what the state of Florida is. I mean, we're one of the largest economy, like the 14th largest economy in the world, like the 3rd largest economy in the U.S. When we run basically like high school student council, where we have freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, and then the seniors retire, and you lose all of that knowledge. But your student council president, your Senate president, they're only going to be there for 18 months.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly hard. But by the way, I don't want to be a chamber chair for more than 1 year. But I understand the intent. Yes. What about unfinished business? I mean, you felt like if you had an opportunity to finish something else before you left, what would it have been?
Look, I mean, I think the major challenge Florida faces is that in basically every area of public policy, no one can name the overriding strategy. Think about housing, insurance, auto insurance, just any criminal justice, the prison system. Like, Florida is all tactical. And I think one of the things that I would have continued to work on is building out longer term strategies in these areas. And I think that's fundamentally what Florida's missing. And I think this is where, if you have a conversation with any legislator and you ask them then kind of what's the long-term strategy for every area of policy, you're going to get a different answer. Maybe other than education, where it's school choice, right? They've got that down to 2 words. But in every major area of public policy, they have their own answer, which is not the answer of the body politics itself.
So I guess, does that tie into the work you're doing today with your organization, Florida Policy Project?
Yeah. So again, the reason I started Florida Policy Project was recognizing this tactical versus strategy issue and thinking about, all right, what if I could go back to the Lord of the Rings analogy and say, what is the one rule that can rule them all? Like what one thing could we possibly do to change this if we can't change this tactical strategy problem? It is, let's focus on best practices. Like, if we could just move the state to best practices in these different areas of public policy, then we'll likely have better outcomes. And
taking those best practices from other states and things.
Correct, right? So if you think of 50 states as 50 different laboratories of democracy working on solving problems, and if we can just research what they're doing and figuring out what's working best for those other states, then Florida will likely get better outcomes if we adopt those best practices. So where do we go to look for that? Well, traditionally, you would think we would go to one of the state universities. Those state universities would have that knowledge. Unfortunately, in my time as a legislature, in the legislature, 0 times did a state university bring me a solution to a problem Florida was facing.
No kidding.
Never.
And that's
Never.
disappointing.
Right. Well, they're actually disincentivized from doing that.
In what way?
Well, because like if I bring a solution and you don't like it, you may not fund the university next year, or you may cut back on some of the funding. Or if I'm a strong advocate for something, right, you may push back on me, and that will reflect badly upon the university. So it's the Australians have a saying: the tall poppy gets cut off, right? Like it's better to kind of stay amongst the crowd of the universities and get my hundreds of millions of dollars versus me try to solve the property insurance or me try to solve the housing issue where a legislator might not like it and potentially cut funding.
Okay. So your mission is to research those best practices.
Yeah. So all we do is hire college professors and national experts, and we ask them, what is the best practice on housing, insurance, transportation, or criminal justice in the prison system?
Okay.
And we seek those best practices. Survey the community, survey the state, figure out what we're currently doing, what is a best practice from around the country, and how Florida we could get to a best practice standard.
Okay. So I'm assuming we can talk about some of those things.
Yeah,
you
let's do
identified those. But as you're presenting those policies, best practices to your friends in the legislature, I mean, how are they received? Is it like, thanks, Jeff, like, good job?
Sure. Well, I mean, it depends. Sometimes it's thank you. Like oftentimes in Tallahassee, it takes a crisis for them to actually act.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Like they didn't solve the property insurance issue in Florida because they really wanted to. They solved it because they frankly had no choice. We had lost 12 companies. The entire real estate market of Florida was on the brink because people were not going to be able to insure. Rates were going up 30, 40%. And finally, they did the right thing. Churchill has this great quote about Americans is that we tend to do the right thing after we've exhausted all other options.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Great quote.
And so what we found here was the legislature got themselves on the edge of the cliff, and then they finally did the one thing that we knew they needed to do, which is they got rid of the one-way attorney fee statute, where Florida was the only state in the country that had the statute. And miraculously overnight, like lawsuits are down 50%. Right. I mean, it was, if you went back to 2012, we were 8% of US property insurance, like claims. We were 80% of the national litigation. Like you can't be the most hurricane prone state and the most litigious state and expect low property insurance rates. Like those two things can't coexist.
That was a recipe for disaster. And that's why.
That's what we had. We had a disaster, right? So I think the key thing that I've learned in the legislature is this: you have to be ready with the ideas when the window is open for those ideas. And that window might be 30 seconds every year, but you have to be ready, or it might be closed all year long. But you have to be ready with the ideas in the waiting when they're ready to receive it, not so much when you're ready to present it.
Do you feel we went far enough with property insurance?
I think the by far the most successful thing the legislature's done, a major area of public policy in the last 3 years has been the changes on property insurance. I think it takes time for things to play out. And I think, but I think rates are coming down. I think you're seeing new companies formed. I think 17 new companies have formed in the last 24, 48 months. I think that's incredibly positive for the state, more competition. And I think you're going to see as rates start renewing, and obviously we haven't had any storms this year. So I think that's incredibly positive overall for the market.
Great. No, I'm excited. And I would echo all those. I mean, our clients are coming in and seeing lower premiums. I mean, we went through a period of time, which I had never experienced in my career. And a lot of our clients are very affluent, but they would just call up and say, I'm paying off the mortgage because I don't want to pay my insurance premium.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and self-insure. And sadly, some of those did not end up in a good position after the storms that we had.
Right.
But excited to see that moving in the right direction. One of the other things that you were hyper-focused on is transportation.
Right.
So what's best practices there?
Well, I mean, I think you have to understand the kind of 3 mega trends going on in the world right now as it relates to transportation. Those 3 things are: the world is getting more electric, it's getting more shared, and it's getting more automated. Right? Those are the kind of 3 overriding mega trends. And so I would argue that we are about to see in the next decade the largest transition that we've ever seen since we moved from our great-grandparents moved from the horse and buggy to the Model T. And if you think about it in terms of decades, I think of 2010 to 2020 as kind of the decade of the shared economy. We got Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, and all those other things. 2020 to 2030 is really the decade of electrification. And 2030 and beyond will be the decade of automation. And so these 3 mega trends are playing out, and the state would have a challenge dealing with one of those trends. It's getting hit with all 3 of those trends roughly at the same time, and really at this fascinating inflection point where the state is grappling with, all right, well, we have Waymo's deploying in Miami and soon to be in Orlando, and likely soon to be in Tampa Bay. So what does that mean when we have driverless cars coming to drive around here? What does it mean for transportation companies that are, we have a shortage of truck drivers. Well, by 2035, a vast majority of our freight will likely be moved by self-driving trucks. Well, what happens to the trucking industry in that scenario, and how does that play out? So I think we see these kind of global trends playing out, and they have ripple effects of ramifications, right? If we're moving more towards electric vehicles, Florida is the number 2 state in the country for electric vehicles, and so what does that do for power generation? How does that play out longer term as more and more people plug in their cars at night? So we have these really interesting
data centers and AI and
data center AI and all of these things. I mean, self-driving is just the AI representation in the world of mobility, but we have all of these really interesting changes that are occurring in the mobility space. Our last report was in transportation space was, where can I find the best return on my investment in transportation? And it turns out that we partnered with the Hillsborough County Expressway Authority on this, and partnered with USF to write the report. But it turns out their recommendation is automating traffic signals, right? How do we use AI and machine learning in traffic signalization? It's existing infrastructure, but
we've got all the data points. Waze.
Right.
So you could look at Waze.
Correct. Right. So how do we use those technologies to speed up traffic in our existing infrastructure and utilizing our infrastructure, and maybe not build that extra lane of road, but we get people through the throughput faster? I mean, the challenge we have is most lines are designed for, the regular afternoon traffic, the regular morning traffic. But when Taylor Swift comes into town, the whole place shuts down. Well, maybe where the lightning plays, the whole, the congestion changes. So how do we utilize best practices in AI and best practices in machine learning to make our our traffic lights more dynamic? Best ROI in transportation, according to our research.
Do you feel we're losing momentum with electric vehicles after losing the subsidy, the tax break?
It doesn't really matter. Whether it happens in 2025 or 2030, the direction is what I care about. And the direction is more and more vehicles are being electrified. And that may be some hybrid form of electrification where they're gas and electric. But the simple truth is, I don't think
GM has ever made any money on their electric vehicles.
No, they haven't. They haven't. But you look, it's one of the most interesting areas of public policy of mobility right now is thinking about how China is impacting the global automakers.
Yep.
Right. Basically, the U.S. has to cut out all the Chinese vehicles, or they'd be offering cars that are better quality at half the price.
And they are being subsidized by the Chinese government. But I would say,
but maybe 5 to 7% is considered like government subsidy. It isn't massive. They just have mastered in a very short order how to build a ton of electric vehicles and incredible quality. I was just over in Europe
for that much cheaper without the subsidy.
Correct. Without even if they cut out the subsidy, they would be better quality, lower price. And the Germans are terrified right now. I mean, their whole German auto manufacturing machine is going, oh my gosh, we used to be the premier in quality and the premier in new features and driving these conversations.
Are they allowed in Europe?
They are allowed in Europe. This is the challenge, right? Okay. Because the European vehicles they're under a lot of pressure, and so your major brands like Porsche and VW and Audi are under a lot of pressure by the Chinese automakers.
I was in Panama this summer with our family, and BYDs were everywhere.
BYDs, Zeekrs, all of these vehicles.
And they were amazing cars.
I went to CES in January, and I hope you'll join us next year if you've never been to CES.
I haven't.
Okay. Come with
What's the acronym stand for?
The Consumer Electronics Show.
Okay.
Right. So the largest really consumer trade show in the world. It happens in Vegas every year. And they have one of the whole sections of CES is nothing but is nothing but related to mobility and transportation. There was not a single U.S. auto manufacturer at CES this year.
Wow.
There was all Chinese manufacturers. Like, my take on that was like, what were the U.S. guys going to show? Because
they couldn't compete.
Right. They were showing Chinese vehicles that were absolutely incredible. Like, and they were $35,000, $40,000, where that car in the U.S. would be an $85,000 vehicle. So I think you see the kind of global pressure going on in the mobility space. And right now, the U.S. has just said, like, we're not taking Chinese vehicles here, but the Chinese are coming in through back doors. Like Volvo is owned by the Chinese, and Polestar is owned by the Chinese. So they're finding other ways in.
So, and I guess in your opinion, do you think the automated vehicles are just going to solve our traffic problems over time?
Well, I think we're going to be living in a hybrid world for a long, long time. But 2050, it will be like, right, people still own horses today.
Yeah.
They ride them in dedicated areas and stuff like that. But like for the most part, for insurance purposes, for a lot of different reasons, most of the time the vehicle will be driving itself.
Well, and I guess at that point, I mean, will we allow people to drive cars by themselves?
Yeah, I think you still will allow people to drive cars by themselves.
There's higher insurance
But in decades from now, there will be places you cannot drive by yourself, and you will have to use automation in order to drive. And like horses, we will have tracks if you want to drive yourself.
I think it was maybe even 10 years ago now at this point. I mean, I saw someone speak, and I forget the name of the company or the organization, but it's something about human driving independence. But
right.
Yeah, fearful that we're going to lose our ability. And especially as Americans, I mean, it is something that
It is. Yeah. But listen, you don't want to get a plane and fly cross country and have the pilot fly that whole time, right? Like the pilot flies like 5% of that flight.
Yeah. A lot of automation, sure.
And most of it's automated. That's ultimately where we're going to go. But the interesting thing is the in-car experience is going to radically change. It's all about entertaining us while we're in the vehicle. And there's tons of money being spent on the infotainment system and how to engage us better while we're in driving. Or we're not driving.
And we're talking broader, transportation trends and future ideas. But locally, I mean, we have for years have had the conversation about a regional transit organization. What are your thoughts on that materializing? Do you think it would help?
No. I mean, we've tried. We had TBARTA. We've had all kinds of. We have PSTA at heart. We have all these different discussions going on.
But not connected. I mean,
what would connection look like? Would it look like a bus rapid transit between the cities? I mean, is it going to look like a cross bay ferry that operates, on the hour?
Potentially, but if you had one organization that kind of orchestrated and could bring the funds in from Tallahassee,
we've had that. It doesn't work. It's just a real challenge to make it work, and there's real no vision for what. But
there's flaws with TBARTA, right? I mean, it wasn't TBARTA was garbage, right?
Your words, not mine. I thought they were great. No, just joking. No, I tried to get rid of them for years. There is all kinds of issues. The challenge is it's just in many times it's just so much more efficient to drive, right? This is like everybody's like, oh, we're going to have a high speed rail between Orlando and Tampa. Great. The problem is it will never be high speed because Polk County is never going to let it go through Polk without stopping, right? So it becomes a medium speed train. Yeah. And then you go, all right, well, where does it drop me off at? Okay, well, it drops me off at Disney and the Orlando airport. Okay, good. Now I've got to get a car to get to my appointment in downtown. So it's just easier to drive. Right, like that's the kind of math that runs into, right. Or I've got to rent it. I got to get an Uber and take it there.
Yes. Yeah.
We have Amtrak today that takes you to Orlando. Vast majority of people never take. So it's
valid point about having to stop. But if Amtrak was quicker, I think you'd have a lot more people taking
maybe,
it. But,
maybe I think it's just an interesting distance, like an hour and a half. People go, or 2 hours even. They're like, I would rather have my car while I'm over there.
100%, but 1 out of 5 times that you take that trip and it ends up being 3 hours. All of a sudden, if I can get there in 45 minutes and I have to get my Uber wherever I'm going.
Yeah. If they can get it down to 45 minutes, maybe. But if you got to stop, I don't know that you get there in 45 minutes.
Okay, fair enough. When I've heard you talk before, you're not exactly a fan of trains. Why?
I love trains. I do. I love trains. I love riding them. I think if you're in Europe, they're fantastic. The question is how does Florida relate to trains, right? Like how are trains going to affect Florida? One, like it's not a 10% solution. Like it's a 1.5%, 2% solution for Florida's traffic.
There's studies that prove that on.
Yeah, I mean that's like yes, there's plenty of studies that look at transit ridership and train ridership specifically. But I think if you just kind of do the math of how many people go between Orlando and Tampa every day, like there's no train that's going to get that mass of people there. And the best we can hope for is maybe 1.5 to 2%. Again, the train's going to have to stop in Lakeland. It's not going to be a full high speed. It might get you there in an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes. And I just think that most people will still choose to drive. Understand that we also have this driverless technology, which ultimately should allow us to raise speed limits. So that may change the game too, as all this technology is coming online. So I think.
So wait for that to happen rather than investing.
Well, I think you can invest
a couple $100 million.
I think if it was a couple $100 million, knock yourself out. Like put a couple $100 million in, put the train in, get it from Orlando to here. But like, is it $5 billion? Is it $10 billion? I don't know. right? It's going to have a B in front of it.
Yeah.
And this is why, like, people have said, well, we'll use the CSX tracks in Tampa Bay. The CSX tracks are like the opposite of the Visa tagline. Like the Visa's tagline, it's everywhere you want to be. This is literally nowhere you want to go, right? Like it's nowhere you want to go. Like, right. Yeah. It's like, it's the old rail line. It goes, if you want to go to Tampa International Airport, great. You would go up to Oldsmar and then turn around and go backwards. I mean, it isn't going to work, right? Yeah. So I think we're much more successful with bus rapid transit. And I think understand, like, we're about to hit the tipping point on automated vehicles. And when that happens, we'll never go back. And that begins to change all of the math. And so, like, are you really willing to make this massive investment today with a train that literally will just take you to Orlando? And then you got to switch trains if you want to go to Miami. But how many of us from Tampa Bay are going to Miami every day that aren't flying, right? It's an annoying enough distance to which just sometimes just driving is easier.
Yeah. I do drive it, a handful of times a year. I would love to be a train that would get me there fast, but I'm willing, because of your guidance and wisdom,
I think when that $200 million train gets in, you should take it, and then you should try the experience of what it's like to Uber to the train station, take the train, Uber to your final destination, then turn around and Uber back and realize you spent twice as much money and it took you twice as long.
Best practices on auto insurance. So you've been very vocal in that space.
Yeah. So Florida hasn't changed its auto insurance laws since the mid 70s, where it's still this $10,000 cap. The average auto accident in the U.S. is a $23,000 to $25,000 event. And, we are afraid to change the auto insurance laws because
why?
Because anything that they do to change the auto insurance laws will have a radical impact on people who are just buying the minimum PIP. And it will potentially raise their rates 30, 40, 50%. And they don't want that hit. So we keep it at 10,000 and realize everybody's underinsured. The bigger challenge in Florida is 20% of our drivers drive without insurance, period.
Yes. Yeah,
right. And so this is why you're crazy in Florida to drive without uninsured motorists, because you have, 23% carry just minimum PIP and 20% are underinsured. So basically you're playing Russian roulette with one bullet in two chambers, and you got a 50-50 shot of getting into an accident with either somebody who's uninsured or underinsured. And so that's why it's so critical. But to me, the legislature has a responsibility to survey what other states are doing, understand what they should be doing and where they should set the reasonable standards for auto insurance and move in that direction.
So what should they do? Because I will tell you, I have 4 teenage kids and I don't want to tell anybody what we pay, but it's painful.
Right.
It's painful.
Right. Well, it's because you're paying for the uninsured motorist, you're carrying a higher limit. And it's because of these other ramifications that you're not, the rate doesn't may reflect the risk for those kids, but you're also paying for the risk of the overall market, which is uninsured or underinsured by 50%.
So the solution to that is
to move towards to raise the minimums of what people are required to carry and to do a better job enforcing the law for people who are driving uninsured.
Okay.
That is against the law in Florida. Yeah. And we have a terrible enforcement mechanism. And for $150, you can pay the fine for driving without insurance. You can go off to, Acme Insurance Company, get a quick quote, get a policy bound, take that to the state, show them, hey, I've got insurance, and then turn around and cancel that policy. Get some of your money back, and drive until you get caught again. This is the Rugadoo of Florida.
So gaming the system, but I guess the thought there is these are the folks at the lower level of socioeconomic scale, and we would be punishing them unfairly. Is that
correct? Okay. But now we punish ourselves unfairly because now we drive around without it. They get into an accident with us, and now they're uninsured, and now we've got to kick into our uninsured motorists, and ultimately our rates go up. So
you're not giving me any hope that anything is going to be done on this.
Well, it's again. One of my favorite sayings in politics again is Ben Stein's dad from Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Ben Stein's dad was Herbert Stein, head of economic advisors for Richard Nixon.
Okay.
And he came up with this great saying called Stein's Law. And Stein's Law is very simple. It is that trends that can't continue won't. Right? Like things that are unsustainable tend to stop. And it is not sustainable that we stay at $10,000.
Wait until there's a crisis.
Again, we're a crisis-led state because everything's tactical. There is no strategy. We keep coming back to that.
This is so depressing.
But it's reality, right?
Yeah.
Florida will stay here until it can't. It has to move.
But where's the political will to say, like, hey, we're driving off the cliff. We're all in this together to say maybe we should stop beforehand and come up with some strategy and policy.
Well, listen, you're only going to be in this job for 18 months. Like, what, do you really want to take this thing on and make this your major issue, or do you just want to punt it to the next team? I mean, listen, if Tallahassee was
you did it. Right?
Well, I did it. I did it on the issues I could work on, but I was not in leadership. I mean, I was never in the chairman or the speaker's job. And like, you need a chairman or speaker to take this issue on. And it's a multi-year battle. You may not get done in 2 years. But ultimately, you know, until you're in a crisis, that tends to be the catalyst that drives Tallahassee to actually get the job done.
So Tampa Bay as a region, how do you think we can establish ourselves through policy or economic development as kind of a thought leader in the state of Florida? We
are. I mean, we are that today. I think one of the biggest drivers of economic activity, and while we in Tampa Bay appreciate it, I think it's still an underappreciated asset, is Tampa International Airport.
Great, yeah, tremendous asset.
Like the people are moving here, the businesses are here because it's a great airport to get in and out of. It's a great it's got more and more flights every year that to me are really driving. And we're not Miami, right? We're not. It's stuck in traffic. It's not Brickell downtown.
Yeah.
And I think that is what people really enjoy. The quality of life here is fantastic. I think we do have a lot of housing challenges right now.
Yes.
I think we're essentially built out, and people this is why Polk County is growing faster than any other county in the state, because it's kind of Orlampa, right? It's middle ground. But what does that mean? Well, it means people are moving to where there's cheap land, which means we need to change our policies as it relates to
drive to survive, right?
Well, you know, here's the thing. Like, if one of your kids wanted you to buy a house today, you would say, all right, let's get in the car and we'll drive. How far do we have to drive until you qualify for a mortgage? Right? Like, you drive till you qualify today in Florida.
Right.
And this is
whether in Hernando, Citrus County, and Polk County.
That's exactly right. So the surrounding counties are growing because it's just too expensive. People want to live in Tampa. They want to live in St. Petersburg. But there isn't the land available. And so what we've seen here is not the home value appreciation. We've seen land value appreciation. And a lot of these homes are older, and we need to have a different philosophy on land use policy, which is what we've been pushing for Tallahassee, to create a Starter Homes Act, to allow lot splits, to allow more density accessory dwelling units. Tampa had this whole discussion about accessory dwelling units, and you know, we had a small revolt in some areas. This is what needs to happen if we want a workforce that's living in our communities, and we want to lower traffic, because they aren't driving in every day, right? They're living here.
They're here.
And this is what you need to happen in the city. And eventually it gets there, but things have to get worse before local politicians will act. You know, St. Pete, Tampa has talked about all of the affordable housing they want to build. They haven't built nearly what they've talked about.
Yeah.
Because you don't solve this problem with money, you solve it with public policy. And the policies are, we've got to allow lot splits, we've got to allow smaller lot sizes, we have to allow for accessory dwelling units, we have to allow for upzoning.
Yes. No, and having the political will to actually not reduce the density once it's approved. I mean, this isn't a great example for Austin, but what I appreciate about the current economic environment and the building that we've done really in the Sun Belt is that supply and demand really works. Basic economics really works.
Well, you let it.
Yeah, right. No, and no developer is going to overbuild. But I mean, what happened in Austin is they built too much housing, and now we're seeing home prices come down. We're seeing rent prices come down because they allowed the additional density. And I mean, we could do the same thing here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's not the political will to make that happen.
Not yet. Not yet.
Wait until the crisis.
Well, I mean, but we're getting there, right?
Yeah.
We're getting closer and closer to the crisis. I mean, it's going to begin to affect employers. It's already affecting employers.
It isn't,
right?
Yeah.
It's already affecting new families that are forming. Right? There just isn't options below. I mean, pre-COVID, you could buy a decent house in St. Petersburg and Tampa for probably $250,000, $300,000.
Yeah.
Now that's $450,000.
Yeah. It was an eye opener at the time, but shortly after COVID, this is probably 2022, hired for a position, someone relocating from Chicago, and came down here looking for a home and decided to stay in Chicago because it was more affordable in Chicago.
Right.
Which it blew our mind.
Correct. Right. Like this is like the first time we've really had these conversations.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to now why we're having this conversation on property taxes.
Yeah.
And what that means for homestead. I mean, these things are all kind of ripples of, we haven't solved the housing problem. We don't even have a strategy for solving it. We currently throw money at the problem, but money isn't going to solve it. There isn't enough money in Tallahassee to solve this housing problem. We have to do it with public policy, but we aren't willing to make that public policy decision yet because we haven't done the research in what best practices are.
Well, that was a perfect transition because I wanted to ask you about real estate taxes.
Yeah.
We seem to revisit this conversation every so often, but it seemed like this last session, it got a little bit more legs than it had in the past. I mean, what is the possibility of them actually eliminating property taxes?
Not good.
Okay. Well, I feel like that's comforting. Maybe tell me that I'm wrong, because what about all the public safety, all the infrastructure that goes into the general fund that funds
So
those
the
things?
governor has put out the solution to an equation without showing you the rest of the equation.
It sounds great on the surface. I mean, you put that
Right.
on the ballot, everyone's going to vote for it.
Well, maybe until they think about all the other collateral issues. All right, well, first of all, renters get nothing. 2, we're going to have to double our sales tax. 3, the sales tax would be collected by the state, and now the state would have to annually allocate to the cities and counties how much they get. So it's this would imagine Oliver Twist with his bowl of gruel going to Tallahassee begging for more. This is what we would have turned the cities and counties of the state of Florida, who largely operate independently and autonomously of Tallahassee for the most part. They ask for special funding, but not day-to-day budget funding. Right. That's what we would create. Right. In the meantime, it would have all kinds of ripple effects on, but because everything would cost, cost much more because we're paying double the sales tax now. It would affect tourism. It would have all these collateral issues. Or cities and counties now go and say, well, now we're going to raise taxes on non-homesteaded properties. Well, right. Great. So renters pay more, business owners pay more. What are the collateral impacts of that? Or we're just going to fee you to death. That water bill, we're going to tack on more to your water bill, more to your power bill, more to your garbage bill, and we're going to fee you to death. So it's just taxes by another name.
I want to take that clip and just put it all over the internet everywhere. So thank you. What about the beg tax? I mean, you're a Pinellas County resident. That's the other conversation, is taking funds from the beg tax, the tourism tax that we have, and applying that towards.
It's not nearly enough to do that. And those bed tax dollars are really dedicated to getting more heads in beds.
Yes.
And we're going to say now we don't want that. Florida's on a perpetual flywheel, and we've already solved that problem. So now we're just going to jack up taxes on tourists. Well,
our golden goose.
That's going to have That's going to have an impact, right? So this is where Tallahassee hasn't thought this out. And by the way, we vetoed the $1 million study that would have laid out options and done the responsible thing. Imagine you went into a doctor and he says, "Listen, you've got some issue. We don't know,
No, that's a typical doctor visit.
But we're
not going to do a study. I think is your point.
Right. We're not going to do the MRI.
Yeah.
We're going to do what we think we should do, but we're not going to do any of the diagnostics behind what would solve this, or what the best practice is. This is what Tallahassee's doing in the property insurance thing, our property tax issue. Florida has a patchwork quilt of property tax exemptions that have been put in over time.
Yeah.
And that's where we should be talking about, is what are the proper exemptions? How do we reform the system globally, but understand it's in the Constitution. You got to get 60% of the vote. So there's going to have to be some carrot in there that gets people across the finish line. Good times.
Yes. Well, once again, I think I'm going to drink heavily after this episode. You've talked about future-proofing Florida also. If
okay.
I recall you seeing that term.
Right.
Is that kind of what we're talking about now, or do you mean something else by that?
Well, I think we have to have a strategy, and we should be following best practices. Those are the things that I am pushing for, right?
And that's the future-proofing.
That's the future-proofing. That's what do we know that's coming up? What do we think we know? We know that we're going to need more power. We're going to need to upgrade our grid. We need more infrastructure in that arena, right?
Yes.
Everything is leaning, whether it be electric vehicles, whether it be AI, compute, whatever. That's going to be a critical failure point down the road for us if we don't solve it. So we need to be thinking about and having that conversation. I think on transportation, I think Florida is truly a leader in the country. I mean, we're having this electric vertical takeoff and landing conversation, which I think is a 2030 to 2040 real conversation before we will see it in our lives. But Florida's a leader in that. And if it works anywhere in the world, it's going to work in Florida. I think on insurance, I think things are getting better. I think we're really lagging in housing. And frankly, I think our prison system is a mess.
Yes. you want to touch on that?
Sure. I mean, Florida's, most people don't recognize 75% of Florida's prisons are operated without air conditioning. And it's not just obviously the inmates that are dealing with that. It's corrections officers as well.
Sure.
70% of our corrections officers have less than 3 years experience. We will lose, 40% of our corrections officers within their first year of hire. And we're operating at essentially a skeleton crew. And I just added 10,000 more inmates in the last 5 years. We haven't built a new facility since the early 2000s. And most of the prisons in Florida are located in rural northern Florida. They were created as jobs programs. But with this kind of rural to urban flight that we've seen in many of those jurisdictions now, there is not enough people to support those prisons. And so they're chronically understaffed. Their officer and inmate violence just in the last 2 years has gone up 50%. Officer on inmate and inmate violence has gone up 50%. So like by almost every metric, we're failing. And this is kind of everybody wants to talk about, funding law enforcement. We politically, you get benefits from funding the front end. There is no benefit of talking about funding the back end. But I will tell you the back end is super important because 85 to 90% of those inmates are going to get out.
Absolutely.
Right. And they're going to come back to community. So we need to be thinking about this. And I think this is one of the things, if you think about it, I think this is Governor DeSantis' largest failure in office is that the prison system is his largest agency, right? The Department of Corrections. But what we really have today is a Department of chaos.
So how do we have the conversation about prisons? I mean, where is it just building more? Is it AC? It's staffing?
Yes. So I think what needs to happen.
And a lot of those are private too, aren't they?
No, we only have 7 facilities that are private in Florida. 50 major facilities, only 7 of them are private.
Okay.
Where I would start was as a commission. I would have a commission of professionals like yourself that get on there, that review what's going on in the prison system, that put together a long-term viable plan for what needs to happen, that work with partners and consultants to really think about and reimagine what our system needs to look like in Florida. It is not going to happen through the legislature. The legislature in its entirety this whole year may spend 4 to 6 hours on the prison system, its largest agency. It doesn't want to talk about it. And so it's until you have a governor who's willing to create a commission and make it their mission to help Florida move forward and solve this problem and implement best practices, it isn't going to happen through the legislature.
So why am I not talking to Governor Brandis right now?
I have lots of things that I enjoy doing. And I love supporting governors and encouraging them. And I would love to get back involved in politics somewhere along the line. Okay. But I don't think governor's going to be in my cards.
Okay. So there's parts of it you do miss. What do you miss?
I love solving hard problems. Like listen, I started a nonprofit because I'm a junkie and I needed methadone. And the nonprofit was my methadone to staying involved in the public policy conversation and continuing to lead on issues. And for me, this is what I really love doing. I enjoy working on these tough problems. I enjoy talking to experts. And I enjoy kind of trying to infuse some libertarian principles into, and frankly, into a government that is struggling to be a small government Republican led.
There was a rumor you were going to run for mayor of St. Pete. Was that ever on the table?
I think everything, when you're out, everything's on the table. Yeah. I think St. Pete needs a lot of help. It needs a lot of help. It needs a lot of passion, and it needs a lot of good ideas. And
you have both.
I have passion and good ideas. I actually don't think it's winnable right now for a Republican.
Okay. So where do you see your next? You said possibly getting back into politics. I mean, have you?
I would love to listen. So listen. I have a passion for public policy. To me, there is no better place in all of public policy to be involved than a state senate. Right? Like if you go to Congress, you're going to spend 10 years voting the way leadership wants you to vote, and that's just not a great place to be. My friends in Congress, they're not really happy. But because you don't get to make a lot of decisions, you're one of 400 in the House, right? Like it's chaos. In the state Senate, you're one of 40. You're really one of 26. Or 27. You're in leadership. You're going to be a chairman of committee. You can make really, really impactful decisions that affect people in your life, in your community every single day. And the beautiful thing is, like, most people don't know what you do. I mean, I think it was like year 4 or 5 that I got in there and I was like, when I go back home, like I'm doing all this great work. Nobody knows what I do. Like that was a challenge at the beginning, but then it was super freeing because it was like, all right, I can actually just move in the right direction. Like the direction I believe is right. They've elected me as a representative to focus on these key issues. And it was really freeing for me after a while to recognize that.
Well, I give you credit. Did people exploit? Because going back to my original opening, I mean, being an independent thinker, it was not uncommon for there to be, that one abstaining vote, and it's you. Did people exploit that when you were in the Senate?
Yeah, like,
okay.
You get, it's easy to say, all right, this guy's put him in the corner, right? Because clearly he's
the black sheep,
right? We put him in the padded room because clearly he's thinking about this problem differently. But I would get there and grab the mic and I would say, this isn't less government. Like, this is not what we're here for. This is actually more government. And what you're doing is growing the size of government, or you're violating this principle that you claim to be as a Republican. This happened over and over again. But for me, the freeing thing and the thing that I enjoyed doing was, I think one of the superpowers of a legislator is curiosity. And I think most legislators lack curiosity. I think most legislators get there and they're the dog who caught the car, and they're like, all right, now what do I do?
Do you think they get into it for the wrong reason?
Maybe not. But it's one thing to go up there and do it even for the right reasons. But if you lack that curiosity gene, and you aren't willing to go to the conferences, and you aren't willing to dig into problems, and they focus on too many things, they go in there and they file a bunch of bills, but they're all over the place. They're not focused on one or two issues, right? My main piece of advice that I would give to young legislators is like, do one thing for 3 years.
Okay.
Like spend 3 years on one problem, like Department of Juvenile Justice, agriculture, whatever, but really focus so that you become a subject matter expert on that area. And then you become invaluable to the legislature because you're the go-to person on whatever topic that is. And I did that for my first few years on transportation. And then by year 3, I was working, by kind of year 6 or 7, I was working on insurance. And then I was able to bolt on some things the last few years. And criminal justice really didn't come into my world until like kind of towards the end of my career in the legislature. But I think for me, my passion is solving tough problems. And there's no better place to do that in the state Senate. And I would never go back to the Florida House.
I love it. I appreciate your passion.
Thank you.
I think, when you had talked about the things that, you should focus on, I think all the things that you hit on and you're working on in your current platform and nonprofit are things that, would impact residents, throughout the state of Florida. And so I hope at some point in time we can move the needle on those, maybe put you back up in Tallahassee and create some change.
We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share with our listeners?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to come to meet with you. Florida is on this incredible trajectory. We're growing. We have to stay ahead of it. We should be following best practices, and we should be a leader in the country on implementing this kind of best thinking on these ideas. There are so many areas of public policy that we have no strategy on. So much of Tallahassee is tactical. For us, it's incumbent upon us to make our leaders think more strategic. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face is just how do we get more strategic thinking in Tallahassee?
I love it. Good note to lead on. If people want to reach out to you or want to support your initiative,
go to floridapolicyproject.com.
Simple.
And you can find us there. We do 2 summits a year. One's housing and one's transportation. Our transportation one's coming up in Orlando, where we bring in mobility speakers from around the country, really talking about the future of mobility. So we're excited about that.
Well, Senator Brandis, thank you for everything you're doing, and thanks for coming on Money Market.
Thank you.
You can find the Money Market podcast at Bank of Tampa online and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and on X. Before you leave, make sure you hit that like, follow, or subscribe button. And until next time, we'll see you around in the Money Market.